All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Don Pizzette, and we are coming back at you with CompTIA IT Fundamentals. In this episode, we are continuing on from a previous episode where we were talking about web browser settings. So if you didn't catch part one, you'll definitely want to jump over and take a look at that. But here in part two, we're going to continue looking at some of the features that we didn't get to in the first part. And here to help do that is Mr. Ronnie Wong. Ronnie, thanks for joining us.
Well, Don, thank you again for joining me as we continue on in our IT fundamentals and taking a look at these different settings that we have available to us to be able to change the browser a little bit, customize the settings so that we can make it do what we need to do. And a lot of times, even more importantly, if the business requires it, right? We actually make the settings the way that they want it to be required as well. So in this episode, we are going to take a look, of course, at the idea of certificates that we can actually verify and see that we're connected to the right web server that we need to be connected to. Talk a little bit about pop-up browsers as well. And then how do we check for website compatibility? In other words, the applications that are running out there, will my browser actually support it, or will it look broken just all the time and I won't be able to do anything about it as well? So those are kind of the remaining settings that we have to do, unless I've missed one. I think that's just about everything here. But overall, Don, that should help us to round out our set of settings.
All right, well, let's kick things off with an important security measure, which are certificates, right? Web browsers have support for HTTP and HTTPS traffic, and that's just the secure version of regular web browsing traffic. And when we do that, the security is provided by a certificate system. So how does that system work, and what does it look like inside of a browser?
Yeah. When we start taking a look at the idea of the certificate and what it actually does for us, it validates that we're connecting to the server that it says it is. And the reason why it's actually important to do that is that, Don, I don't know where a particular server is on this planet, okay? So if I connect to Amazon.com, just as an example, I don't know if it's in the next room, which I do know it's not in the next room, but it could be anywhere on this planet. Well, how do I know it's really a server from Amazon, or is it Don Pizzette actually saying, hey, I'm Amazon, okay? So what companies can do is they can go and purchase a third-party certificate that validates and verifies that this is their server. And then they put that digital certificate on those servers. When I connect to it, I should be able to get a copy of that server, and it gets validated that way. That way I know that I'm connecting to the right server. If they hand me a certificate that's not valid, well, nobody's going to attest that. They're not going to say, hey, yeah, that's actually the right server. They're instead going to return to me something that's going to say, no, we can't prove that this is the server that it claims to be. And when you see something like that, you should kind of be suspect about whether or not you're really connecting to who they say that they're connecting to. So it's very important that we start to be able to understand when we connect to certain sites that they have some certificate on it, especially if you're doing some type of business transaction. Do not put your debit card or your credit card information in a site that doesn't at least validate what server they're on.
All right, so Ronnie, if I'm browsing the web, how do I know if a site is secure or if it isn't secure?
So most of the sites today, when you go to browse to it, it will give you a nice, a notification right on the address bar. Let me show you what I'm talking about right here. So I brought up our own website, itpro.tv, and when I take a look up here in the address bar itself, I can see that up here, it actually shows me this nice little green here. Now, this is because we also have an extended validation certificate as well. Sometimes you'll see that the green may not be there, but on this one, if I click on just that part of it, it will tell me, here's the website identification, and it shows me what actually has been identified here. It says, hey, yeah, this is actually identified by IT Pro TV. DigiCert says, yes, we can do that. And it says, should I trust this site? It allows us to know that we actually did connect to the site that we believe that we've connected to, okay? So when that's actually done, it's a lot of times a visual reminder in that way that it can happen. But there's other places, though, that you may not see that. So for instance here, let me go to this one right here, which I've already pulled up. If I select this, notice it says your connection isn't encrypted. That's all that one says, but I can go to another one. This is what I wanted to get to. Is this one, and because this one is actually a secured site, but notice this one doesn't have any green on it, Don, okay? And Don, you were explaining that this one is just the idea that it's validation, but it's not that extended validation like what we have.
Right. So when you buy a certificate, you have to prove that you are that person. So for example, with itpro.tv, when we bought the certificate, we had to prove that we owned that domain. And there's two ways to do it. There's regular validation, where they just basically send you an email to an IT Pro TV address to verify you have control of that, right? That's one way. But that can be spoofed or intercepted. You could potentially have a false certificate. So extended validation, EV, is where they go a step further. They call you on the phone. They request billing statements or bank account statements that prove that you are that entity, that you are that company. So you have to be able to act on that behalf. And by doing that extended validation, you know for a fact that this certificate was issued to that company. And that's why you get the nice big green block and the green lock. It's calling that out. Like, this company went through the extra steps to get verified. Now, the website you were bringing up a moment ago, I know it's called Bad SSL, but their certificate, it doesn't mean their certificate's invalid. It's actually a good certificate.
Right.
They just didn't go through the extended validation. And there's a few reasons for that. It usually comes down to cost. Extended validation certificates cost about 10 times as much as a regular certificate, so they're expensive. But in this case, this site is just as a demonstration site. So they don't need extended validation. They can just say, look, here, we're encrypted to a regular standard. So you get the lock. The data is encrypted. It is protected. But it's not as high a level of validation as you would have with like an EV cert.
Yeah, and this is important for us to be able to notice and identify right away. It wasn't too long ago where everybody on the web started to actually do this, where you also see like HTTPS up here too, where you're typing that in to make sure that you can get connected to the website. But before that, right, there wasn't any encryption involved and it was just HTTP. Well, then they also didn't have a certificate involved with it sometimes too, so you didn't know whether or not you were really connecting that site. So how did that end up showing up? Let's say that you have a certificate, but it's no longer any good because they only last for a certain period of time before you have to renew them again. Well, this site gives me this ability to show you that, because it's a lot more difficult, Don, today to find a website out on the internet. I was just trying to think of someone like, oh, I know who used to have one, Cisco.com, the just entry, the basic corporate website. I was like, yeah, no, they hadn't sort of secured that. And now they've secured that, which is fine. But if I click on a site that doesn't have one, the great thing is the browser kind of stops us, okay? So it actually says, hey, look, this site is not secure, okay? This might mean someone's trying to fool you or steal your information that you're sending to the server. Are you sure? Well, if I click on details, I can see that it actually has a flag error here. The website security certificate is not yet valid or has expired at that point. If we go and take a look back up here at the address bar, well, now notice the difference between this and the home page that we were on too, is that it no longer has that little lock on it. This one just has site information. So it says show site information. Now this one just says it's a secure Microsoft Edge page. That's all it's saying. But overall though, it can't, it's just saying, hey, there's a certificate, and this one's supposed to be, I think, expired. So it doesn't mean that the certificate itself is spoofed or anything at this point. I guess it could, but it's just saying that it's no longer valid. So we're not confirming anymore because it's out of the validity dates of whoever's actually issued this certificate. So we can see that very easily by going to these sites, and most of your browsers will do something very similar to this. If it doesn't tell you where this site is secure, please go back. It might even get you a little bit more. I'm trying to bring up. I think there was one where it actually just brought you directly into that site itself, but so that you could see it. So let me, bad SSL is what I want. I keep typing in wrong letters there. All right. So let's see what happens if I go to one. Now, you don't really want to do this on the internet itself as far as your own page, but this one's for demonstration. So you might even see that it actually kind of does this, where it takes everything, turns it in this red one, this entire red page here. But it will let you go on if you actually say, I don't care about that, and let you proceed on too. Sometimes you also have the browsers that will automatically have security settings on them, what they call their own smart settings that are in the background, that try and keep a connection of what are known as bad listed or listed bad websites that are out there that are warning you to stay away from these sites too. So once those things are up, you should see something too. And here it is. Here's the certificate error. And let me show you what this one actually shows as well. Okay. So website problem, that's all this one says. And then you could click on that link here and be able to find out some more information. But both of those are something that we should be looking out for as we start to browse around, especially if we're trying to stay connected. If you have paid for a service, don't just go, okay, I'll type this in and you go to the site. If you don't see the lock, if you can't validate the certificate, somebody may be trying to fool you into doing that. So just realize that those are some of the different ways to easily spot that.
All right, now certificates, those help with validating the identity of a website. So now we know we can trust the website. But even on some websites that we trust, they do things that we don't necessarily like. And I know one thing that really bothers me are advertisements, right? But even worse are pop-up advertisements, where I go to a website and then another window pops up with some kind of an ad. And if they had embedded the ad in the website, we would kind of know whose fault it was. But when it pops up, they're doing that to kind of make it where it doesn't seem like they're the ones who caused the ad. So that's really frustrating. I know most modern web browsers have a pop-up blocker that's built in. Can you show us how that functionality works?
Sure, Don. Right here in Internet Explorer, just like in every other browser setting, you'll probably see that they've made it so obvious because this was so annoying at a point in history on the internet that instead of trying to make a fancy name for it, like secure your browser or third-party security, they just said, we're just going to call it pop-up blocker. And I believe that that's kind of universal in every browser so that you don't mistake this setting. So here on Microsoft Edge, if I click on the ellipsis button again, I can scroll down to the settings, and in a moment, I have to continue to scroll to the advanced settings. And it's a simple toggle button inside of Internet Edge, right? Or inside Internet Edge. Inside of Microsoft Edge here, where it says block pop-ups. So if you turn this off, well, it will no longer block pop-ups, and you go to a site that already has all these things loaded and ready to go, you will get pop-ups that would just kind of populate your screen, and you'll just be browsing, you have to click off of it. And the problem is when you click off of it, Don, sometimes you don't know what you're actually really clicking on, and that could have actually launched one of those scripts that we were talking about in an earlier episode that we were taking a look at. And so you might actually be, promoting the actual issue and problem, and doing that instead of actually kind of closing out what you think that you could. So these pop-up blockers, they appear just about everywhere, okay, that you have ready to go when you do that too, okay? So that's actually kind of the idea, and we had already looked earlier when Don had also mentioned the idea of ad block, the ability for ads to come on. They are bad, okay, there's no doubt. But we can also do what we did a little bit earlier, which is download from the extensions or what they call add-ons, right? And you'll see that there's a bunch of different ones that are available out there for you. And they effectively try and block the majority of the ads that you'll end up getting without you, asking for the ad to come in. So take advantage and look, and you can actually see. Everybody, of course, says theirs is the best. I don't know if anybody knows which one's actually the best one that there is, but there's a lot of different options like that.
And, just because the pop-up says that you want a free dinner at Red Lobster doesn't mean that you actually did. That used to be a popular one. I haven't seen that one in a while. And one of the reasons why we don't see them so much anymore is a lot of us use things like ad blockers, right? And we talked about it in extensions and add-ons, but a lot of ad blockers will take care of not just pop-ups, but script blockers or scripts as well. I think in part one we talked about those kind of separately, but during the break, Ron, you had shown me another piece of software that you had. What was it called? TunnelBear,
right?
That would actually allow you to basically manage all of that, to stop scripts as well as other things. So can you do a quick demonstration for the viewers?
Yeah, Don, I can show us TunnelBear here. And when we take a look at TunnelBear, this is where it's important that we remember the different browsers will have different add-ons or extensions that we can put in there. TunnelBear is only really available inside of Google Chrome for us. So I'll have to launch up the Chrome browser. So down on my taskbar, I went ahead and installed Google Chrome. And when I launch up Google Chrome, I'm going to select the settings button over on the upper right-hand corner, and then go down to settings. And then it's in the web page where we have these settings. I can click on that little icon with the 3 bars across it, select extensions, and then I have to go back to extensions again because it's not in there by default. You see a few of them there, but I open the Chrome Web Store, and this is where we'll see a lot of the extensions as well. So you can take a look and see that there are a ton of different extensions that are listed here. By comparison to what we saw in the Microsoft Edge store, there's a lot more as what we end up seeing too. Okay, so if I search out tunnel, if I can spell tunnel, bear, What I'm looking for is this second option. Now, it looks funny, right? It says Tunnel Bear Blocker. And I select that one. Block ads and take a bite out of online tracking. It blocks many types of online tracking, ad blockers, ignore everything to show, some, content to publishers. You name it. You can do this, and you can choose what you can do here. Okay, so all I have to do is simply add this to the Chrome browser, and then make sure it says, hey, are you sure it can read and change all of your data on the websites you visit? Add the extension in, and in a moment it's checking, it's verifying, and now you can see that there's a confirmation that it's added it all in to do what we actually want to do. Use extension by clicking on the icon, so it tells me exactly what I need to do. So now if I click on the icon, it shows me that it's actually on at this point. So all we have to do now is we can browse to a website to help us out. So we're going to choose another website. So last time we chose CNN, so if we choose Fox News this time, Fox
We're going to be fair and balanced.
News, fair and balanced is what we'll do here. And we'll see what ends up happening on this one. And you can see this little number is starting to crawl up again, okay? So there it goes. It's continuing 24, 25. It's 27. It's continuing to do some blocking here for us. And now you can see where it's actually blocking 28. Looks like it's going to continue to add up here in just a moment. It doesn't look like it's actually partway through. Look at that, Don. It looks like it's only like, what, a quarter of the way through, or maybe a fifth of the way through.
There's a lot of elements. And you'd be surprised when you go to these websites, like news websites, where they're not charging you money to go there.
Yeah.
They are making money one way or another. And typically it's through advertisers and connections to other systems that are tracking data about you. So that's why it's so important to be just aware of all these site connections. And so blocking pop-ups, blocking scripts, blocking things from companies that you're not engaging with directly can usually be a good idea, but it can potentially break some site resources. So always be aware of that.
Yeah. And on this one, since Don, we mentioned it, if we kind of full screen so I can zoom in and not cut everything off here. 18 ads, 5 social buttons, 3 fingerprinting, 3 script trackers. It breaks it down, and we can even turn off what we don't want, what we do want by simply toggling it. And there it goes. It went up to 30 at this point. That's probably still counting up. So it's a nice addition of some of the different things that we can do in terms of something like ad blockers that really do help us out. That's just another one that we can show an example of this right there. But everybody will have their favorite. If you ask anybody that has, any time that they love that browser, they've probably picked some type of ad blocker to also install as an extension there too.
All right, so we've had a chance to talk a little bit about security-related features and some advanced things there. Beyond security, though, web browsers are changing very, very fast, right? New browsers come out all the time, and we've talked about Internet Explorer, we've talked about Microsoft Edge, Google Chrome, and Mozilla Firefox. Those are probably the biggest ones. But if we really wanted to go crazy, we could tackle Apple Safari and Vivaldi and Opera. There's this almost limitless list of web browsers that are out there. When somebody designs a web page, they've got to take into account all these different browsers and try and make it as compatible as possible. And so as an IT technician, one of the things that I deal with is running into websites that aren't compatible with particular browsers. So can you tell us a little bit about how that compatibility works and even how we can test that on our own?
Yeah. Now, Don, this is kind of the weird one, right? The very fact is you may go to one website with whatever browser you choose, and it looks great. You get onto somebody else's machine and you try and show them through a browser you haven't used before. You're not as, you go, okay, it's just a browser, it's no big deal. You go there and some of the stuff looks like it's missing or out of, place in what it's doing, or it just tells you you can't actually look at it, or it just looks bad, okay, when you start seeing that. And that is when the web design itself is working in one browser versus not working in another browser overall. And that means we have to figure out how that can actually be done and what happens. What Don was saying here is that the people that are designing this, they have to think about this, who their target audience is going to be. And sometimes they may go, look, we can only support this one browser or these 2 browsers. And they go, on the rest, no, we're just not going to do that. But most websites that want you to have a higher flow of traffic to that website, they're going to try and make it as compatible as possible. But at the same time, also offer the ability to go, look, there's certain browsers we don't want to accept. older ones that aren't up to date that can cause other issues on those computers. So what's the way that we can test some of those? Well, you simply take, your website, and you just open it up in all the different browsers that are out there that are possible. That you go, here's a chance Don's going to be using Internet Explorer, okay? And go, does it work or does it not? Well, he can just launch it up and see, and when that happens, then you kind of go, all right, that looks good, doesn't look good. Or you can also try and test it out in different ways. I found a site that really does help you out, at least in getting you started if you're a developer, to try and see whether or not your website design is going to be compatible with what we have. So we'll take a look at my screen here. This is from www.browsercompatible.com. All right, so let's take a look at this website. This actually shows us the ability to do some browser compatibility, and says it checks your website for all these that Don just mentioned, just about. And is your website cross-browser compatible? So we can just submit our URL and get a report, and maybe even begin to solve your own problems at that point if you wanted to. So let's just take our website, Don, and actually type it in here and see what ends up happening if we do this. So I do just itpro.tv. A little bit small, but in just a moment it will of course bring up this nice report for you and show you, here we go, okay, and here's a nice little legend, right? Fully compatible with the green check marks, some flaws in the implementation, a lot of unexpected behaviors or unimplemented features. That may be a bad thing, Don, I think, okay, and outright not supported, that maybe not, okay, so you can see that. Now here's where it begins for someone that's developing for a website, right, Don? The idea these are different languages. Is that what we call it? Yeah.
When you view a web page, web pages are typically written in what's called HTML, the hypertext markup language. But then they use additional features to customize the way things look. Because HTML is really not all that powerful. It's only got a handful of commands in it. So they'll normally combine it with something called CSS, or a custom style sheet. Every website uses CSS these days to make it look pretty. Well, the problem with CSS is it's changed over the years. And see how they're measuring for CSS 2.1. Not every web browser supports CSS 2.1. And that's not the fault of the website. It's the fault of the web browser. But as a web designer, if you want your website to look pretty, you have to figure out, well, here's this one technique I want to use that looks really good, but it's not supported in Internet Explorer 6. Is that okay? Well, Internet Explorer 6 was the default web browser in Windows XP. Windows XP came out in 2001, 17 years ago. And how many people are still running Windows XP today? Microsoft doesn't even support Windows XP or Internet Explorer 6 anymore. So is it bad that we don't support Internet Explorer 6? No, you shouldn't be running IE6. IE6 is a very non-secure browser that puts your data at risk. You shouldn't be using it. But that's something we have to think about, right? That there is this cutoff that when you create a website, you can try and support as many browsers as possible, but there comes a point where you have to sacrifice some browsers for the sake of security or for the sake of functionality. And that's kind of what you're seeing here, is that we've actually got pretty good browser support for most things, but there are some settings every here and there where maybe we don't support IE7 or IE8. And that's okay, because most people should be running IE11, right? That's the area where you have to keep in mind.
And so this is just a great report, right? It allows us to see a lot. I don't know if it's been updated recently, since it says that 9+, which I assume is a little bit dated at this point. But overall, though, we can see some of the things. No issues found on these things on the DOMs here. And as you continue on HTML4, look, it seems like for our site, no issues on HTML5, which is probably one that we really are wanting to make sure that we get into. And then from that point, if there's other errors, this is where the developer can use these to help to track down some of the different things that are actually out there for us. But it all depends on what your site needs to be compatible. Now, this also helps you if you're just browsing, okay? If you're browsing, you're saying, hey, I don't know why this website isn't looking the way it should, or, why isn't it actually coming in the way that I think it should? You can just simply come here, at least as a basic test, type it in here and see if your browser and your version number is supported. And as you take a look at what you're, looking, and all of a sudden you realize your IE7 or 8 is not working too much, well, don't be surprised, since those things are now probably a decade old as well. But at the same time, it at least gives us that ability to check that out. Okay, so it's not always about having to test out with every single browser. You might be able to find sites like this, and this was one that I found fairly easily to be able to at least show us this too. And you might find out that some sites, right, even after you find out that they're compatible, one will actually run better than the other on that site as well. So you'll just have to test out that way manually at some point.
All right, well, Ronnie, I think we have run through a pretty good gamut of features inside of the web browser and just seen a lot of things that we can tweak. Now, keep in mind that we could have ignored all of this, right? And just run with the default settings from the vendor, whoever made your web browser. But I think we've all seen throughout part 1 and part 2 that some of the default settings, some of the default functionality is not exactly what we want. And it's nice to be able to get in there and adjust and control that ourselves. Now, before we wrap this one up, Ronnie, do you have anything else you want to add?
Well, remember, this is what we said at the beginning of the series. Browser is probably going to be one of the main applications that you'll see used on just about every desktop, whether you're in a working environment or in a home environment. So it's a good thing for you to understand that people will choose whatever browser that they want to, but know that all these settings that we went over are probably available in all of them. So there's not one that's not going to be available in them. You might have to search a little bit harder and figure it out, but all these are actually available depending on your need and what you want to customize there. They're ready for you to take a look at.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap this episode up. In this episode, we had a chance to talk about certificates, pop-up blockers, and script blockers, as well as testing for browser compatibility. All important things when supporting web browsers in an enterprise environment, but also just in your own home use. All really useful features to have. Ronnie, thank you for contributing all of that. All right, and for you guys out there in TV land, we're going to wrap this episode up, but stay tuned because there's more CompTIA IT fundamentals to come. We have a lot of objectives to get to, and we're just wrapping this one up right here before moving on to the next. So we look forward to seeing you there. But for now, signing off for IT Pro TV, I've been your host, Don Pizzette.
And I'm Ronnie Wong.
And we will see you next time.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.